And the specific qabila, the specific like family tribe that Hud alayhi salam was sent to, they were called Iram. Their location was a location called Al-Ahqaf, between the sandy hills, windy and sandy hills. And it was between Yemen and between Oman. They were the first people to worship idols after the destruction of the people of Nuh alayhi salam. Dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the people of Ad that they were extremely powerful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Fajr, haven't you seen what Allah did to the people of Ad? They had no one in comparison to their power. Dear brothers and sisters, what type of power did Ad have? Nothing like them was created in the land. They had bodies that were huge and powerful. They had wealth that was so enormous. They had so much luxury. So not only did they have the money, they had the offspring and the families to build that wealth. And they had the livestock, and they had the agriculture, and they had the gardens, and they had the rivers that flowed through those gardens. They had luxury to the highest level. So much so that they used to build buildings, and they would never live in them. They would find a huge mountain, and they would just build something up there, a huge castle. Someone would pass by and they would say, who built this castle? Who lives there? Nobody lives there, but it belongs to Ad. There's another castle there up on the mountains, huge and mighty. Who lives there? Nobody lives there. Who built it? Ad built it. And so they would just build this, just playing games. Their excess wealth, they would just build this. And political power, nobody could stop them. They would go anywhere, and any law that they said was the law. Because of their power, because of their physical power, because of their political power. So much so that Ad said, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala records their statement, who is more stronger than we are? The most powerful nation. Who is more powerful than us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't they see that Allah, the one who created them, has more power than them? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, travel in the land, so look and see how was the final end of those who came before them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the people of Ad. Hud alayhi salam was from their tribe. Hud alayhi salam, we can then understand that Hud alayhi salam had a strong, enormous body, alayhi salam, and was very handsome. He was from them, speaking in their tongue. These people, as we said, they worshipped idols, and they specifically worshipped 3 idols. The names of the idols were Suda, Thamud, and Hara. Hud alayhi salam was then giving this message to the people of Ad. Worship your Lord, you have no God except Him. It doesn't mean that Hud alayhi salam spoke to them once, he gave them a lecture, there was some public gathering, he spoke to them once and they disbelieved. That means that the messenger spoke to them again and again and again and again. And so these people, they disbelieved. That Ad disbelieved in the messengers. Now notice, how many prophets did they disbelieve in? How many prophets? All of them. Allah said they disbelieved in Hud alayhi salam, but because they disbelieved in one of the messengers, all the messengers have come with the same message. And so they disbelieved in all of them. That's number one. The people of Ad were extremely skillful, and they were extremely intelligent, except when it came to matters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when you see nations, where do you visit? Most of these locations that you are visiting are nations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and as for Ad and Thamud, and clearly will appear to you from the traces of their buildings, their fate. What happened? Are nations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and as for Ad and Thamud, from the traces of their building, their fate. What happened to them? That shaitan beautified for them their sins. And so they were blocked from the straight path that they indeed were still, even though they were gifted with intelligence and skill. Shaitan still misguided them. That intelligence and skill is not enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Ad, they asked for the punishment to be brought to them. The first of the punishment was that a drought was sent to them. This drought, it lasted for 3 years. And when there is no water, bring me the biggest nation. And if there is no water, what will happen to them? There is no water to drink because there was no water for the livestock. And the land will dry up and the people will die. And so this is what happened to the people of Ad. For 3 years, there was a drought that befell them. And so they said, who's stronger than us in power? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the water away from them. The people of Ad, whenever something like this would happen, they would go out and they would pray to the idols. They took out 70 men and they went to pray to the idols. And they had like their Amir and they're calling to the idols, calling for rain. And it is said, and this is in the history books, that 3 clouds appeared to them. The clouds, as they were praying to the idols, it was said to them, a red cloud, yellow cloud, and a black cloud. And it said, which of these clouds do you want? And the Amir of them said, we want the black cloud. Because the black clouds carry the most rain. And so they chose the black cloud. It was a wind. Once the people came back, initially when they saw the rain clouds, they said, like the rain clouds, they're going to bring rain to us. They saw the weather. And they said, they rejoiced that now the rain is finally, they were in a drought for all these years. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, rather it is that which you were trying to hasten. What were they trying to hasten? The punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody can hasten it. It has its time. Allah, yes, you will be destroyed, but you still got some time. And now, initially they thought that it was going to bring rain. And they say that there was a woman amongst the people of Ad who felt something different. And she said, this isn't a rain cloud. The wind started picking up and started to scream. And it became violent. And even though the people of Ad were enormous and large and built very well fortified places, if anybody just stood up, the wind would snatch them. Now when you see a tornado, and we're not saying that this is a tornado, but when you see a tornado, how long does a tornado last? Only a few minutes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about this wind that was sent to the people of Ad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the wind for 7 nights and 8 days. Probably just in a few minutes they'd be destroyed. 7 nights and 8 days. Allah destroyed everything. He wiped them from the earth. They were like a tree that had been chopped down. It was said that they would be lifted up and they would be smashed down on their heads and all their limbs would be out like roots like that. They were all destroyed. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is there any remnants of them?
Supreme. Its gods rule the universe from atop Mount Olympus, and the world below flourished under their protection. But nothing lasts forever. In battle after battle, the power-hungry Romans wore the Greeks down to the bloody end. The Greek gods were locked up in their castle in a secret Olympic. started by Prometheus, who had been forced to do so against his will. All hope was lost for the Ancient Ones, or so they thought. An extremist group called the Olympian Restoration Army wanted to bring back the ancient ways. They've been quiet until now. This is where our story begins.
We left Chicago happy to thaw out in Greece. Some students from Athens invited us on an expedition near Mount Olympus. They said they'd found the entrance to a secret temple at the base of the mountain. So we grabbed our gear and didn't look back. It had taken 2,000 years to discover, but we wasted no time trying to help them gain entrance. 3 of us made the journey across the Big Blue. Dr. Richard Headstrong, specialist in cryptology. His daughter Emma, need I say more? And me, Will Rock. I never knew how exciting archaeology could be until Emma introduced me to the department. That's why I'm still in it. On our way over, we got wind of some terrorist group called the ORA. They were some cult trying to bring back the good old days. We figured the worst we'd have to deal with is a few sign-carrying twerps in togas or something. We were met at the airport by one of the scientists who'd drive us for 3 days to the base of Olympus. He made my skin crawl. When we finally got there, it was worth the wait. There stood this magnificent temple, carved into the side of the mountain, with this massive Titan statue standing guard. And what was with this group of self-proclaimed scientists? They'd been there for weeks, and all I saw was a bunch of beer-guzzling thugs playing cards. Well, to hell with them. What I needed was to unlock the code that would open the temple doors. We could be looking at the entrance to a city that everyone thought was just legend. It took weeks and weeks of long, hard work to crack the code, but we finally came up with something that just might do the trick. We deciphered some verses which we figured would open the temple door. But we also uncovered a warning. If the doors to the city of Olympus are ever opened, the glory of ancient Greece will be restored. But beware, the gods will seek swift vengeance on mortals for their imprisonment. Vengeance? How could we enter this place? It was too dangerous. Suddenly we heard Emma scream outside. We ran out to find ourselves surrounded by ORA uniforms. I knew those scientists were fakes. They must have heard us talk about chanting verses to get in, because they had Emma, and they wanted in now. We did what they asked, and with a few magic words, the doors ground open. The ORA fell to their knees praying, except for the ones dragging Emma, kicking and screaming into the temple. They were yelling something about giving this virgin to Zeus as a bride. The professor whipped out his pistol yelling, "Get away from my daughter, you bastards!" He fired at them with all he had. He couldn't shoot for shit. Their response was swift. Bam! He was dead before he hit the ground. If I didn't do something quick, I'd be next. I wrenched the gun out of the professor's hand and started firing. I hit anything and everything, including the statue, which shattered into 1,000 pieces. Whoa, what was this? All of a sudden, this huge blue cloud whirled out of the statue, materializing into something I didn't want to mess with. What was I supposed to fight this with? Great. Looks like lights out for me. It smothered me like some sort of acid cloud. I couldn't breathe. My God, that light! I tried to speak, but instead this strange voice thundered inside my head.
I am Prometheus, bringer of fire. I have been imprisoned by Zeus for thousands of years. You've set me free, mortal. I'm in your debt for eternity. From this day on, I'll give you the strength and courage you need to save the Virgin and savor victory. The mark on your hand is a symbol of your new power. And now, our journey begins. Find the gods' hidden treasures, which will give us the strength and power we need to survive. They are the key to Zeus's lair. Together we'll avenge the injustices we have suffered. Our destiny awaits.
To see inside this doorway is simply amazing. Look at that. People will say as to why they went to such extent to create something so impressive is because, well, they did it because they could do it. Well, yeah, they could. I agree, somebody could.
Bullseye.
is this one. Look at this. When you see the picture on the left, you simply have no frame of reference of just how massive it truly is or how high the ceiling is until you see it with a person within it. What on earth was the purpose of this highly precise stonework? Seriously, what is that? Like a portal or something? I mean, really, what was the purpose of making this? Was it just decoration? And again, why is the ceiling so high? I think it's possible that Petra was created by the survivors of the last cataclysm, which of course I've shared details of this. And without further ado, let's take a look at what's actually inside the so-called treasury. As you can see, when you walk up the steps, there are 3 doors.
Salih alayhi salam. The people of Thamud, they were Arabs and they lived actually near to is Tabuk. And in that area is in the area where Thamud used to live. And that area till today is called and known as Mada'in Salih, meaning the dwellings of Salih. And so the people of Thamud, their skill was that they would build homes into the mountain. If you go back to the beginning of all these stories, the message that perhaps gets lost as we're explaining it is the secret to their salvation. It's a secret to how they could have prospered, how they could. And
advanced technology as well. They were even more advanced in their technology than their former cousins Ad. They built, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them in the Quran and relate the story or the mention of Thamud, who used to bring the huge rocks and stones from beneath deep valleys. In another verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and you, O people of Thamud, is referring to, you carved into mountains homes and palaces. And they would carve with their tools rooms and corridors and buildings and stories and beautiful features inside of rocky mountains. And they allowed air and light to come in spontaneously and also in an orderly fashion. How did they bring huge stones the size of hills from beneath valleys? And how did they actually carve into mountains palaces that they lived in, allowing light to penetrate and air to penetrate everything? This was their advanced technology. Till today, it is a wonder of the world.
Their construction of these castles is so strong that till today, you can go to Petra, you can go to Mada'in Salih, and it's still there. You're talking about, Allahu A'lam, how long it was, maybe, at least 2,000 years. It's still there, these structures. But when it came to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were the most ignorant of creation. Salih alayhi salam came to these people, told them to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, told them to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings upon them, which, as we said, is a critical point of the da'wah of all messengers. And so Salih alayhi salam would call them to Allah Azza wa Jalla and argue with them and debate with them, meaning that Salih alayhi salam was very wise, was very strong. He's from their people, Akhuhum Salih, right? Their brother Salih. And they had high hopes for Salih alayhi salam, meaning that he would have got a very high government position. He would be working for the government, lots of benefits, permanent job, all of that. He would have got a really good status. And they were saying, what a pity that you had to say this. Because, you had a great career. Because now, everybody's going to say that you're crazy. Are you forbidding us from worshiping that which our fathers worship? And so they became fed up.
Okay, Salih, then bring to us a sign. We want a miracle. You call yourself a prophet, we want a miracle. But now they were being sarcastic. They were being silly. So what did the leaders come and say? Childishly, they said, we want a miracle from you, show us. So Salih turned back to them and said, okay, good. You want a miracle and a sign? I will give you a miracle and a sign from my Lord if he wills. I am but a messenger from God. So then, Salih turned around and said to them, my Lord says, anything you choose, and I will do it for you bi-idhnillah, with the power of Allah. They said, we'll decide. They said, you decide. God has made a condition. You're not allowed to harm it, you're not allowed to touch it, and you have to leave it to graze wherever it wants.
And so some of the people believed in Salih. As the Quran does mention that there were people from the people of Thamud who did believe in Salih alayhi salam. But the majority of them, they disbelieved in Salih even though the camel had been brought. And so the condition was that the camel was not to be harmed in any way, and that the camel would drink one day from the water and they would drink the other day. This is such an enormous camel and such a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It would drink the water of the entire people of Thamud, and it had its whole day for drinking. And the day when they weren't drinking from the water, they were actually drinking from the milk of this camel. Enough milk to give to the entire tribe of Thamud. And how many people are we speaking about? This is the tribe of Thamud and this is Naqatullah. It was pregnant and it gave birth to baby she-camel. Now Salih alayhi salam made a promise with the people of Thamud. He said that Allah is bringing the sign and do not touch it with any harm. And they made the promise.
The chiefs of those who behaved arrogantly among his people said, to those who were considered weak from those who believed, do you believe that Salih is sent by the Lord? They said, indeed, we believe in the messenger with which he has been sent. Those who were haughty said, we certainly disbelieve in what you believe. So they slew the she-camel and insolently defied their Lord's command and challenged Salih, saying, bring us that which you threaten us with if you are a messenger. It says that a group of young men who were troublemakers, they got together in secret with the chiefs of the city. And they said in secret when Salih was away, they said, we're going to go in the night because this she-camel has caused us problems. What is this? Everyone's now believing in what Salih has come with. Get rid of it. We can't lose what we have of pride and power. Secondly, what's this? It drinks from the whole well. We have to wait till the next day. Get rid of it. And thirdly, this is a lot of meat. It can serve the whole city. Get rid of it.
The worst of them, his name was Qidar ibn Salif. These 9 people, they did this. One of them, actually, Qidar ibn Salif was the one who started it. They first cut off the tendons. Once they started in the cutting and the spearing and the arrowing of the camel, it cried out. And the whole land was shaking from her cry. She was crying for her child, to warn her child of what they were doing. And as the books of Tariq and Tafsir, they'll say that this fasil, the baby camel, it climbed up and ran away, and it climbed up to the top of the mountain, and it cried out itself. It cried out 3 times. Salih alayhi salam said to his people, he said, enjoy yourselves in your places, in your dwellings, 3 days. That this is a promise that has no lie in it. And Salih alayhi salam, the people who believed in Salih, they left. And now they had 3 days. And so they started partying. And they were mocking and ridiculing. And so on the first day, their faces became yellow. And they would say, oh, the first day has passed. And they're like, oh, no punishment has come. Second day, their faces became red. And they said, oh, the punishment is coming. It's day 2, ha 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 ha. And then day 3 came and their faces turned black. And they said, it's day 3, where's the punishment of Allah? Where's the punishment? And they're laughing and they're mocking. So much so that they went to an exaggeration in their mocking that they started wearing their kafan in mockery. Like it was like a party, like Halloween or something like this. That they're dressing up like the dead. And they said it's the 3rd day. And then at that 3rd day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down his punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ وَعَادٌ بِالْقَارِعَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Thamud and Ad, they disbelieved and they claimed that it was a lie. When you say disbelieve, they're saying that the Qari'ah, the day of judgment, this shaking, the quake that's going to lead to the day of resurrection, they disbelieved in it. Meaning they said that it was a lie. It's not happening. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and so as for the people of Thamud, they were destroyed, annihilated, bit-taghiyah. This is actually interesting. Taghiyah and Qari'ah. The translation of the first one is, they disbelieved in the stunning calamity. In many verses of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the day of resurrection happening with Al-Qari'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when that Qari'ah happens, you know how they say that the mountains will be turned into stone? The mountains will not crumble to the sea when the Qari'ah happens. You know what will happen to the mountains? They will be turned into dust. It's nothing, like a feather. That's what the Qari'ah is going to do to the mountains. And now because Thamud disbelieved in the Qari'ah, they said it was a lie, it's not happening, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them with a taghiyah. And the translation is actually interesting. It says storm and lightning and so on and so forth. But that's not necessarily what a taghiyah says. Some of the scholars actually in fact have mentioned, and this is something that you realize later because at that time you couldn't understand what it is, the power of sound waves and its ability to destroy. And you're talking a destruction that happens like instantaneously. They thought that they would live forever. They were obviously wrong. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them, He wiped them out as if they never lived there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them.
Allah says, and the people of Al-Hijr disbelieved the messengers, and we gave them our signs, but they turned away from them. They were hewing houses from the mountains, dwelling therein deemed security. So the thunderous cry seized them in the morning, and what they achieved proved no avail for them. As-Sayha, Allah sent Jibreel alayhi salam, and he screamed, and they died.